It started on Monday. He was sitting on the sofa after work, as usual, sipping cold beer and lazily scrolling through the news on his tablet. Her voice came from the kitchen. "Help me clear the dishes." He grunted in response, without taking his eyes off the screen. "Did you hear me?" Louder now. In 5 minutes, she entered the room. No shouting, no reproaches, just a strange, focused expression on her face. She came closer, leaned over, and whispered, "Okay, since you don't want to make a big deal out of it." She snapped her fingers. It seemed to him that everything around him had grown. The furniture grew, the ceiling rose, the remote control in his hand became heavy, like a weight. His body became smaller, much smaller. He fell off the sofa, floundering in the folds of his now huge t-shirt. The world had changed. It was 10 times bigger, colder, and more dangerous. "What have you done?" he cried in a thin voice. She just sat down calmly on the sofa, tucked her legs under her, and placed him in front of her, now the size of her palm. "And now, dear, you're going to help me. First of all, nail polish. I have a pedicure in 2 days, and you know how much I hate doing it." He looked at her feet. Before, they were just feet, now they were columns of flesh, her toes like pale pink tusks, each the size of his torso. A bottle of polish and a brush were placed in front of him. "Are you serious?" he shouted, looking up at her face. She just nodded. "As serious as it gets. Either you paint them or you live in a dusty can. Guess which you'll choose." He tried to argue, shout, threaten. It was useless. His words were barely audible, and she responded to them like an adult, responding to the whining of a capricious kitten, with irony and gentle threats. Thus began a new life. He painted her nails until his hands began to ache. Once, the nail polish spilled, and she made him lick up the drops. She said it was for balance. He lived in a shoebox, with matches instead of a bed and cotton wool instead of a blanket. She cut clothes for him out of her old socks. Sometimes, depending on her mood, she let him eat from her palm, as if he were a little animal and she were a great mistress. One evening, she brought him a toothbrush and told him to scrape the hardened dirt in the corner of the shower. He refused. She picked him up, squeezed him between her fingers, and whispered, "It will hurt if I squeeze harder, but I can. I'm a giant now, remember?" He didn't answer, just took the brush. Sometimes she talked to him like he was a pet. She called him Fluffy, Little Ball, even though he was completely bald, or simply Little One. She gave him tasks to clean the keyboard, scrub the tablespoons, stretch the threads into yarn. And then night fell. She put him next to her pillow. He could hear her breathing, feel the heat of her body, and his body shook with every movement. But at night, she sometimes said truly frightening things. "You've gotten better. Less means quieter, more obedient, almost perfect." Sometimes he dreamed of escaping, of becoming his former self, or at least run away. He tried to run away, crawling along the edge of the baseboard, climbing into the trash can. But she always found him. And once, she simply placed him in her palm and carried him back to the box, like a tired doll. "Boys don't run away from their mistresses. And you are my boy, aren't you?" He nodded. He always nodded. Once, she brought a box of doll furniture. She bought it at a toy store. "Look how comfortable it is. A bed, a table, a chair, everything you like." He wanted to scream that it was humiliating, that it was torture. But instead, he said, "Thank you." He no longer knew how much time had passed. A month? More? He lost track of time, being a toy. His voice became hoarse, his movements mechanical. She allowed him to read pages of the newspaper, magnified through a magnifying glass. Sometimes she turned on the television for him, she put on cartoons, and he watched the children laugh. Once, she gave him a piece of paper, a sheet the size of a bedsheet, and she told him to write a list of all the things he was willing to do to earn a promotion. He wrote, dusting, painting nails, cleaning shoes, ironing the hem of a dress, speaking kindly, being silent, be comfortable, be. She reread it, smiled. "But you're learning." That evening, she pressed him to her cheek, almost affectionately. almost humanly. If you're good, maybe you'll grow to the size of a mouse. Well, or a guinea pig. You like that, don't you? He didn't know what to say. He no longer knew who he used to be. Was he once big? Or was it just a trick of the mind, caused by strange magic? Maybe he was born small? Maybe she was the goddess herself, and he was her toy? All he could do was wait. Every morning for her footsteps, every evening for her whims. And when she said, "Today you'll massage my heel," I rubbed it in the corner. He just nodded and went. After all, he was no longer a husband. He was smaller. And she was still smiling. He tried everything. Whispering, shouting, mentally, like a prayer, like a spell. He repeated words from an old book, which he hoped would restore him to his former height. But nothing happened. Magic, if that's what it was, obeyed only her. He could study, search, hope, but she held the key. And she knew it. The next day, after his attempt, she didn't get angry. She didn't yell. She didn't even punish him. She just smiled. Slowly, with an almost maternal tenderness. She lifted him in her palm and watched for a long time as he looked away. "You thought you found the formula?" she whispered. "But it was just a dream, dear. An illusion. You're still mine, little one." He didn't answer. He didn't argue anymore. Now everything was different. It was scarier because it was quieter. She no longer commanded loudly or humiliated him out loud. She just lived nearby, and everything she did made him want to be good. "I bought you a book," she said one day, "in 1/12 scale, with letters you can read. See how I care about you?" He read. He tried. He even started writing a list of things he could do for her, just to make her happy. She no longer called him Fluffy or boy. Now she said, "Roommate, fellow resident, my little helper." He felt that something was changing. Not in her, in him. Sometimes he noticed that he was waiting for her to come home. He tidied up his box, left a tiny flower he found on the windowsill on the table to decorate her fingernail as a surprise. He waited for approval. He became softer than he had ever been. Sometimes in the evenings, she would cover him with a cotton blanket, stroke his head with her fingertip, and say, "You're the best. No one loves me as much as you do. No one tries as hard as you do." And he, it's scary to say, felt proud. Weeks passed, maybe months. One night he woke up and realized he didn't want to go back anymore. He didn't need to be big. He didn't need to make decisions, take responsibility, justify himself for not helping, not hearing, not having time. Now his world was simple, clear, limited. She was the boss. He was the executor. It was a cage, but a cage that was warm, cozy, and understandable. He stopped looking at his hands with longing. They were small but nimble. With them, he could write her name with petals, carefully sharpen her pencils, sew buttons onto her blouse. "I'm not angry anymore," he told her once, sitting on her palm. "I know," she replied. "You're mine now. That's your freedom." He nodded. Because it was true. One day, when she brought him new miniature furniture, a real desk, and a tiny lamp, he cried. Not from pain, from the fact that someone remembered him. She saw this, pressed him to her cheek, and whispered, "You've become perfect, not because I shrunk you, but because you accepted it." He wanted to say something, but the words disappeared. He just pressed himself against her skin and closed his eyes. He no longer thought about how to escape. He didn't make plans. He didn't remember what the real world was like. Now he knew only one home, one room, one mistress. And as scary as it sounds, it was enough for him.